Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you're all well. Um, we're just on the channel Next Flies. There's only 6,000 subscribers. Just a bit of a. It's nothing to do with the news or anything really. Although I am next going to make a video on a young lass that was stabbed on a bus. You may be seeing it's doing the rounds. The story. I seen it yesterday, to be honest, or the day before, but I just forgot to make a video on it. But I've just seen another video on it there. It's quite horrific, to be honest. Little young lass sat on a bus, Ukrainian lass apparently, black fella just sat right behind her and for no reason whatsoever just stabs her in the neck. Um, so, absolutely disgusting, to be honest. And again, this lass had no chance in the world to defend herself, and just a horrible attack. Like, it's unbelievable, to be honest, what goes on this day and age. But it does go on. That's the problem. Now, we've got a video here called "They Tortured Her for 6 Hours in a Failed Social Experiment." Marina Abramović. So, basically, this lass gave people 6 hours to do whatever they wanted to her with a table full of implements, including knives and guns. And she wouldn't stop them for 6 hours, and they were allowed to do whatever they want. And people being people, it went a bit mental. So let's play a little bit of this. I just passed the video yesterday. I just thought it was quite an interesting video and shows what human beings can be like. Again, looking at like the Nazis and the Nazi concentration camps and what some of the guards done and how evil people can be when it's called upon. And even in this case, it wasn't called upon. It was an optional thing. And yeah, it's sick people around. So let's have a listen to this.
In 1974, inside a small art gallery in Naples, Italy, a woman stood completely still for 6 hours, letting a crowd do whatever they wanted with her. Next to her stood a table. On it, there were 72 simple objects. Some were comforting, like a rose, a feather, some perfume, but others were quite the opposite. These included things like a knife, scissors, a gun, and a bullet. There were no instructions for the audience, except one. They all had 6 hours to use the objects on her as they pleased. What happened next revealed one of the most shocking aspects of our human nature that most of us would rather not believe. This was Rhythm Zero, an art performance that nearly ended in murder. Many people thought Marina Abramović was deranged. As a young woman, she often pushed the boundaries of physical and psychological endurance, and she tested the limits of human experience through sacrifice, vulnerability, and pain. In what was then Yugoslavia, she was born in 1946 to parents who were decorated Communist Party officials. Naturally, her childhood was strict, cold, and highly disciplined, shaping her in a secularist, materialist view. But, on the other hand, her grandmother was devoutly Serbian Orthodox, instilling Marina with spiritual values as well. It was from this contradiction that came an obsession, the spiritual nature of suffering. Between 1973 and 1974, Marina began a series of performance pieces that she called rhythms. Each piece tested her body, her mind, and her threshold for pain. In Rhythm 2, she took pills prescribed to psychotic patients to simulate a breakdown. In Rhythm 5, she lay inside a burning star until she lost consciousness from smoke inhalation. In Rhythm 10, she stabbed between her fingers with a knife until she drew blood. But the final piece of the series would be the most extreme. It would essentially reverse the formula. This time, the pain wouldn't come from within. It would come from people on the outside. She would become the passive object, and the audience would become active in imposing pain. Here, she would discover just how far they were willing to go.
So, as you heard, few experiments on herself, various things, stabbing knives, lying in the fire until she passed out from smoke inhalation. all sorts of things. But then the final test, or the final puzzle, whatever you want to call it, was turned around, and people were pretty much allowed to do whatever they wanted to her with all these implements left on a table, some of which were deadly: knives, machetes, guns, a bullet. You seen? So all sorts of implements that can inflict pain, but at the same time there was plenty of implements that were nice. So it was a test of the people, of the public, and what they would do. So it didn't go well, to be honest, as said there, because a lot of people, we've got a lot of sick people around. That's the beauty of it. I think it was kind of an experiment. Again, she was heavily religious there, and it was showing people's true colours in many ways, like the what goes on in people's heads and what people don't do, but would like to do. Is Well, it's kind of proof of that in a way. They were allowed to do it and done some sick things. You know what I mean? They didn't treat this woman with respect or anything. So let's have a listen.
Precisely 8 p.m., Marina Abramović stood in the middle of the gallery. She was dressed plainly. She did not speak. She did not move. She did not even make eye contact. But, in her own words, she said, "I am the object. During this time, I take full responsibility." For the first 2 hours, the crowd was hesitant. Viewers, unsure whether this was performance or provocation, circled her cautiously. Some placed a rose in her hand. Another kissed her cheek. A few moved her posture gently, shifting her like a mannequin. But, eventually, things escalated. By the third hour, someone had cut off her shirt with a razor. Others followed, and soon her clothes were in tatters. Someone even cut her neck deeply enough to draw blood. Then they proceeded to drink it. Various people touched her inappropriately. Thorns from the rose were pressed into her stomach. But it didn't stop there. A man picked up the gun from the table and loaded it with a bullet. He then placed the weapon in Marina's hand, positioned it at her head, and wrapped her own finger around the trigger, slowly putting more and more pressure. Still, she didn't flinch, as that would contradict the whole point of the performance. Meanwhile, a fight had broken out between different factions of the audience, as some tried to wrestle the gun away. They essentially divided themselves in two groups, those that didn't want to harm Marina, and those that did. This sudden polarization wasn't random. It was the result of a powerful psychological shift taking place inside the room, a live demonstration of de-individuation. The performance quite literally paralleled infamous experiments like the Stanford Prison Experiment and Milgram's obedience study. In those experiments, ordinary people who were given roles and instructions committed acts that they never thought themselves capable of. In the realm of psychology, it's well known that while in groups, individuals can lose their sense of self-awareness. Accountability dissolves, empathy fades. Surrounded by others, your identity merges into a collective, one capable of cruelty under the right conditions. Here,
Yeah, I mean, another way of looking at that as well. Say we do have conflict in England and a civil war of any kind. I mean, to be honest with you, I think I can see it already. Like, if you look at these left wingers at the protests, and even some of the right wingers, to be honest, but predominantly most of the left wingers. If the police weren't there, these people would attack. Do you know what I mean? So, and maybe attack in number. And again, it's kind of the same sort of philosophy that once you get into sort of a big group, a lot of shit can go out the window. To be honest, a lot of shit can go out the window once you're in a big group. I mean, this has been proven in multiple tests, as it's just mentioned there, like the Stanford experiment. It's kind of a known fact as well that if you get enough people in a room, say 30 people, and you get 29 of them to agree that the answer is wrong, the 30th will also agree that the answer is wrong and will go with the crowd. This has all been proved, like human nature, in many ways. So I thought this was a very interesting video, a very interesting experiment. I had maybe heard of it once before in passing years ago or something, but just that it never, like, it never logged in my memory as an incident that's happened in the world. I passed the video again. I thought it was very interesting as well, just sort of human nature, and it could play out. It could kind of play out in real time for us in the near future, especially in England if conflict heightens, because we have got sort of teams here, the left wing, the right wing, people gathering in numbers. The left wing, when they seem to gather in numbers, become very, very aggressive indeed. These people aren't as aggressive. I've noticed when they're not in this big group that they seem to be in, they're still aggressive. They are, but they're not as aggressive. I wouldn't have thought they would attack you really on their own. They would shout and scream, but they have this now when they're in big groups. They want to attack. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, it's social experiments, how people behave. And again, just very interesting that again two factions came about. People wanted to hurt her, some people didn't want to hurt her, and a battle commenced within the room between the actual participants of the experiment. So very, very interesting. Let's play the rest of it.
Here, you don't feel guilty for your actions, because now your actions are no longer yours alone. With no clear rules, no punishment, and no consequences in Rhythm Zero, the audience had defaulted to violence because it became normalized as time passed. Psychologists call this informational social influence. This is where, in ambiguous situations, people look to others to determine the correct behavior and simply follow. The real horror of Rhythm Zero, though, wasn't that people committed violence. It was how easily they slipped into it. There was no explicit reward, nor were there any conditions. Only an opportunity. After 6 hours, when Marina simply took a step forward, literally reclaiming her personhood, the crowd suddenly fled. It was as though a spell had been broken, and with it came a flood of recognition. The audience could no longer pretend. They were no longer interacting with just an object. After the audience had touched her, cut her, stripped her, they simply ran away, unable to face what they'd done. Each one of them had suddenly regained their sense of individuality and, when faced with the prospect of a confrontation, chose to escape. Later, Marina reflected on this chilling moment, saying, "If you leave it up to the audience, they can kill you." It's worth noting, Marina Abramović wasn't the first to test the morality of a crowd. A decade earlier, in 1964, Yoko Ono did a similar performance, one that was called Cut Piece. She'd walked onto a stage in Kyoto, Japan, dressed modestly. She said nothing. She simply knelt down, placed a pair of scissors in front of her, and waited. One by one, people began to cut away pieces of her clothing. They snipped just the edges, small, polite cuts. But as time passed, their hesitation faded. The cuts grew deeper and more unhinged. Strangers began cutting away parts of her bra, her skirt, until eventually there was nearly nothing left to remove. Throughout all of this, Yoko didn't protest once. And in that silence, there was a kind of accusation. Much like Rhythm Zero, Cut Piece wasn't about a spectacle. It was about exposing human nature. Both Yoko and Marina placed their bodies into the hands of the audience, and both asked, "What would you do if no one stopped you?" Unsurprisingly, both received the same response. Marina Abramovic's case was, personally, a very hard read. Not because of the physical violence, but because it shows just how thin the line is between empathy and apathy. What's terrifying isn't just that people inflicted harm. It's how easily they convinced themselves it was acceptable. And these same people could be people we're around every day. Even worse, it could be our own selves. Today, Rhythm Zero is regarded as one of the most powerful performance pieces in art history. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was honest. It makes us think about what we're really capable of when the rules are removed. It also resonates now, in the 21st century, more than ever. In an age of internet anonymity, groupthink, and outrage mobs, de-individuation isn't just some far-removed phenomenon. No, it's online, it's cultural, and it's political. Rhythm Zero was a warning to everyone. It was a warning that violence thrives when thinking for yourself stops.
Yeah, and again, it's kind of why I mentioned it as well with where we're going in England at the minute. Violence thrives when thinking stops. And again, I can see like just showing you these crowds here, and I already alluded to the left wingers, and I can see this sort of, if you want to call it, rhythm zero in the crowd of the left wingers, very much so. And whether that's being done on purpose and someone is sort of leading the crowd in being aggressive, but I can kind of see that in the left wing movement. Just when they're all together in these big groups, they're very aggressive and they would attack and use violence if given the opportunity by the police. But and even then, some still try it while the police are there. So a very interesting video. A very interesting experiment, and again, it's human nature, and human nature, unfortunately, isn't great. And again, it's. I mean, I think me personally, if I was in that room, I'd be on the side of trying to defend this woman and not hurt her personally. But you don't know. That's the thing until you put into these situations. And this is over hours, and you know what I mean. But I think me personally, I'd still be on the thing of not hurting this woman. But again, this is the experiment, and it's been done twice, as I said, with Yoko Ono as well, and it pretty much went the same way. Um, but Yoko Ono didn't give them the same sort of options. There was just one pair of scissors, and obviously people started cutting off her clothes. There wasn't guns and knives and all sorts of different things there. But it kind of went the same way, so it just kind of shows that humans are dicks. Don't trust any of us because we're all dicks. And in big groups, we're bigger dicks. There's the model of the story. So again, I seen this yesterday, and I thought it's a very interesting video. It's a very interesting experiment, and I've also seen this young lass on the bus, this Ukrainian, getting stabbed by a black guy, and um, it kind of just it, the stabbing just made me sort of think of this sort of experiment and how people, even without being mentally crazy, which the guy on the bus was probably most likely not mentally sane. These people are all mentally sane, and they all eventually turn to violence and hurting this woman when given the option. So just shows human nature really in its dark ways. And yeah, I'll play at the very end of the video. There's only 30 seconds left.
Yes, Marina Abramović survived Rhythm Zero, but it still changed her completely. She later admitted the experience aged her. Gray hair began appearing in her 20s, she claimed, after the performance. And it's not hard to see why. Yet still, despite all of this, she continued her performances. Nonetheless, out of all her art pieces, Rhythm Zero still remains one of the most chilling works in the history of performance art.
So there you go, Rhythm Zero, Marina Abramović. Yeah, a bit mental, really. And but again, it's I'm not surprised if that's the right words. I'm not surprised the way it went because yeah, humans can be dicks, and I often just think if the old saying, you don't know what goes on behind closed doors, and even people you know really well, might not be completely sane, or you know what I mean, might have dark weed. You don't know what goes behind closed doors or behind people's eyes as well, so to speak. So I just thought it was a very interesting video, very interesting experiment, and again, a proof that human beings are dicks. Even when given the option, you know what I mean? Like just when given the option, they can be dicks. So I just thought very interesting. I'll leave it there. Peace.